Hey, good morning, everybody. I hope everybody can hear me just fine. You're muted, so I guess if you can hear me, I wouldn't know. My name is Jeremy Pielemeyer, and I'm super excited to be on the phone with you guys this morning to talk a little final expense with you. We have opened up some questions, so at any time during the broadcast, if you guys want to jump in by asking a question, feel free to do that, and I'll be more than happy to answer those questions. So I just wanted to be real brief with you guys. I know that meetings, conference calls, trainings are great tools to enhance your business and to grow, but not something that we all want to sit and do for 30, 45 minutes. So I'll make my best effort to get you guys some knowledge that you can take to the streets and get you back on your way so that you can be writing some insurance. So today I just wanted to talk a little bit about final expense insurance. And I understand that out there in the field, the final expense opportunity is tremendous. It really opens up an opportunity not only to serve our clients, but to generate income as well. And one of the greatest things about the business that we're in, the senior market, when you're selling Medicare supplements, final expense, dental, vision, cancer, kind of this gamut of products for the senior market, is that everything that we're doing is beneficial for the customer on some level. And I'm not knocking vacuum cleaners or vacuum cleaner salesmen, but one of the things that I've talked about in previous trainings is the passion that's behind what we do. For me personally, is that when you go into someone's house and you sell them something, a vacuum cleaner, for example, that's a great item. Everybody loves to have clean carpet, but there's nothing life-changing about that, I guess, unless you have very bad allergies. What we're doing in the senior market is going to change lives. When that customer passes away and their beneficiary makes that call to you, to your office, and they ask, what benefits are available, you answer that by saying, hey, your mom took out a $10,000 final expense policy. That's life-changing. And I think that one of the things as agents that we run into are really a couple of issues. Number one is, I think oftentimes, and I can speak for me, we see ourselves as a specific product agent. So you ask an agent, hey, what do you do? And they say, hey, I sell Medicare supplement. What do you do? I sell final expense. What do you do? I sell cancer. I think that we have to look at ourselves with no preconceived ideas and say, hey, we're senior market specialists. We're insurance professionals. Our job is not to go into a house with an idea that a Medicare supplement or a final expense is the best thing for our customer. The thing that I've used many times as we've kind of talked through this as a group internally is if you call and you make a doctor's appointment and you say, I need to see the doctor next week or tomorrow because I have an ear infection. You go in, the nurse grabs you, you wait 45 minutes if you're lucky, and you get in the room. And as you're headed to the room, they're weighing you. They bring you in a room. They take your temperature. The doctor comes in, and when he sits down on his little chair, he doesn't say, "Hey, I hear you have an ear infection. Let me write you a prescription for that and send you on your way." Generally, my doctor would sit down and he would start to ask a bunch of questions. In its simplest form, I really believe that he's fact-finding. He's saying, "Hey, Jeremy, I hear that you have an ear infection. Could you tell me a little bit about that? When did that start? Where have you been? What issues have you had?" And then he begins to go through a process of things that I feel are unrelated to my ear infection. He listens, he takes my blood pressure, he listens to me breathe, and then he kind of gets around to looking into my ear. And I know you might ask yourself, well, how does a final expense appointment or an insurance review relate back to a doctor's visit? And I think it does very much, simply because that doctor is not taking your word that what's wrong with you is what you've already diagnosed yourself with because you read on WebMD. He's doing his job as a professional to make sure that no stone is unturned. And really, just kind of in a brief few minutes today, I want every one of us to have a different perspective and to look at this and say, okay, let's really take a look at number one, why final expense is good for the customer. Because as agents, we've got to believe in what we're selling. And if you ever talk to me about what I do, I get excited, a little bit probably too excited because insurance isn't super sexy, but I'm excited because I truly believe in what we're doing as individual agents, as an organization, and as an industry. So we ask ourselves here, why sell final expense? And I think the short answer is because everybody needs it. The final expense clientele obviously is not most likely going to be these high earners, 80, 90, 100,000 people, dollar people a year that have saved well and preserved their wealth. I think that our clientele is really the demographic that is more paycheck to paycheck and kind of middle America. I would say just normal everyday people. And those normal everyday people are going to die at some point, just like you and I. And when that time comes, I think there's real problems with people's budgets that we can help out with. So kind of just touching at a very high level, again, opening it up for questions. And then if we need to circle back one-on-one, we can do that. But my goal is to touch on this sort of quickly. Not because I want to get off the phone with you, but because I understand that everybody's busy and a 45-minute presentation is going to keep you from really taking in the meat and potatoes of this call. So how to quote final expense, that's a really easy one. We have a mobile app that you should have on your phone. It's EIS Mobile. You have login credentials, and it's super simple. You just tap the icon on your phone. When you do that, it gives you a prompt to select, the consumer's age, death benefit, and level or graded, or both. Different options. You hit the button, and it shows on that quote engine all of the policies that are available for you to write. And I'm not even going to touch on the next slide, which is what products we offer. Because I really believe in doing what's best for the customer and not pushing a specific product based on, we certainly don't want to write a consumer product that's $20 higher just because our commission is better. So what I would like you to do is if you don't have the final expense mobile quote app, call in after the call, get the information, log in, take a look at it, and you will see a plethora of companies that are available for you to write. If you're not appointed, give us a call, and we can definitely take care of that. We're going to talk just real briefly about kind of how to sell final expense. What does that look like? What is that procedure? And maybe a quick example. And then lastly, kind of a final expense needs analysis. So this is kind of an older slide when we're going back to looking at final expense numbers and demographics. But I think that the reason that we wanted to pull this in is because we're talking simply about commission. So we know that a consumer needs final expense insurance. That is, again, assuming that the consumer hasn't, already planned, doesn't have everything prepaid. Guys, I'm talking about the folks that you and I have been in houses and we've had a conversation and they've said things like, well, I just don't have the money to take care of my final expenses, or they're going to throw me in a ditch, or my kids are going to handle that. I'll kind of circle back to that topic in a second, but those are the people that we're talking about. I don't necessarily, and I don't want to judge a book by its cover, but I don't think that the clientele that we're looking for on a $15,000 final expense policy is the couple that retired from corporate America with pensions living in a gated community. But I think the key on this is that we're talking about an average commission of $300 to $400 when we're talking about final expense policies. And the final expense market, what I think is so interesting and I'll touch on this again in a second, is that folks are buying these policies. If you ever want to kind of do something creative to sort of take the temperature of the client, is just ask them if they have final expense. And you're going to find that a ton of people the majority of people are going to say that in fact they do. So as we're kind of looking at just kind of in general final expense, kind of targeting that customer and who that customer is, let me just touch on really three things briefly. Number one, I'm a huge believer in existing clients. I've said many times that I'm about working smarter, not harder, and I'm not afraid of hard work, and I'm more than happy to get out there and grind it out, do whatever it takes to put food on the table. But there are easier ways to do things, and I kind of, my style in having conversations with people are to really tell stories. I think that great salespeople have to be great storytellers. And when I'm talking about working harder, not working smarter, not harder, I think back to something that I saw in my grandfather's garage as a young kid, and it was one of these lawnmowers that you push, and it has blades. And I think it's probably the only one that I've ever seen. But if you've been around long enough, and obviously with the internet can look them up, before we had gas powered lawnmowers, people were pushing these little wheels around, and they would cut the grass. And I think about the time that it would take versus my zero turn mower now, that I can jump in, put headphones on, turn a key, and do probably in an hour what it would have taken my grandfather to do in several hours. I think it comes back to, look, I'm not going to go pull that old mower out because I enjoy taking longer at something or making it harder. So for me, the customer that I have that's already trusted me, that's already signed, their lives change. The car that I buy brand new today, I'm going to have to replace at some point. It may be 2 years or 5 years or 10 years, but that new car is going to become an old car, and I'm going to need a new car. And that customer that you have, they're going to have things in their life change. They're going to have family members that pass away, and it's going to show them the need for final expense insurance. Doing that needs an assessment to really determine what's best for the customer is a huge thing. I had a real life incident. I rear-ended somebody in my car while I was out traveling, selling. And the lady got out of the car and she started talking about her neck and her back hurting and that she needs to go to the emergency room. I totally did not think that was legitimate and got kind of worried. And I called my insurance agent and said, hey, I hit this lady. She says her back hurts, her neck hurts. She needs to go to the hospital. What kind of coverage do I have? And forgive me, I'm not a car insurance guy, but I believe he said like 25, 50, 25, if I have that right. And when I asked him what that meant, he said, well, what that means is that the maximum amount that it'll pay, like for a car, and maybe it was 50, 25, but just follow me on this and use some imagination, was if I were to total out a new Lexus, the max that they would pay was like $50,000 for this Lexus. And then if there was some type of a medical issue that cost $100,000, then the max they would pay, that was $200,000. The max I think they would pay was $75,000 or whatever that minimum was. So my question to the agent was, okay, so what happens if I hit a car that costs more than $50,000? And he said, well, you'll pay the difference yourself. So I followed up with the same question. Well, what happens if I put someone in the hospital and their medical bills are more than, $100,000 or whatever that coverage was? And he says, well, you probably won't have the money to pay the difference in the bills. So the insurance company will sue you to get that money. And it really made me mad. And I expressed my displeasure to the agent and told him that day on the phone that I was going to cancel my policy, because when I asked him the question, why would you get me a policy like that? His answer has stuck with me all these years. And it was, I thought you wanted the cheapest thing that was available to you. And this has been a topic many, many times that has been brought up, is maybe I did want the cheapest thing. I don't know what my answer would have been had he proposed that to me, but I can tell you that if somebody told me I would be sued for anything over X amount of dollars, that certainly would have been something I would have wanted to make my own decision on. So when we're talking about needs assessments, when we're giving quotes to consumers, we need to let them make the decision. We don't need to assume that based on what they've said, that we already know what's best for them. I think that's what hurts us as agents in a huge way. Just kind of going through this slide here of going through the presentation and asking questions. Here's kind of my thought. I'm not going to lay out a final expense presentation for you right now. My goal isn't to make you the best final expense salesperson that has ever walked the earth after this call. My goal is to get you to think about why final expense is a product you should be offering. Because again, I said in the beginning of the call, if you don't believe that final expense insurance is a product that every customer should have, then it doesn't matter how good you are at selling it. I don't believe you can sell something that you don't believe in. So when we're talking about final expense insurance, let's talk about it in a way that's not framed as a death benefit. And these are conversations that I've had with my clients. Number one, life insurance is something that can pay for final expenses, the casket, the funeral, whatever might come up. But here's something I think that is just as real for a consumer, and I'm just going to make up numbers. I don't work for Social Security. Please know that my information this very second isn't based on any factual numbers. We're going to use simple math, and we're going to say that a husband and wife who are both 75 are on Social Security, and that's their source of income. The question that I would ask a consumer would be, what would happen if today your income was cut by 40%? That's a real question, I think, as insurance professionals, not as MedSup agents or final expense agents, but as insurance professionals, we need that answer. We need the consumer to think about that. And the reality is that nobody lives forever. And it's also not legal to cash a dead person's Social Security check, at least to my knowledge. So when that spouse passes away, if we just make up a number and say that they're making $1,000 a month, that's simple math combined. When one of them passes away, $400 or 40%, again, just a made up number, is gone. So the question I would throw out to everyone on this call, to everyone you see, is how would it impact your life if tomorrow, unexpectedly, 40% of your income was gone? Now, I can tell you from my family's perspective, it would be a tremendous hit for us. There would be scrambling going on to try to figure out how to restructure things. And honestly, I don't know that there'd be enough time to do that. So when you're talking about a senior, the reality is Bill, the husband, he doesn't probably cost 40% of the total income. I mean, look, he's riding in the same car that she's riding in. Gas isn't any more or less expensive. Electricity has to be on. House payments have to be made. All those things are happening. The expense that Bill has that's fixed, or Martha, is maybe an insurance premium and the loaf of bread that's being purchased and shared. So overall, I don't think 40% cut in income is a true reflection of what that individual costs. So to me, final expense insurance doesn't just end with, yeah, we have a prepaid funeral. It comes to the heart of questions that I would have wanted asked when my car insurance decision was made for me. Is like, okay, I get that you have a prepaid funeral, but if you don't mind me asking, and great questions that I could use in the field and did use is, hey, my grandfather made about $1,400 a month in Social Security. I don't know where you guys stack up to that. You'd be surprised at how people will just say, oh, well, we make the same amount or we make less. I think it's our job truly to make a difference in people's lives. So we have to circle back with that and say, okay, you're making $1,200 combined as a couple. Do you guys owe on lawnmowers or cars or anything like that? Because that's the real world. The the generation now that's kind of retiring, they're carrying debt. Their houses aren't paid for. Their cars aren't paid for. They're supporting grandkids and their children. So finding out kind of what that need is and positioning life insurance as not just something that pays for a death benefit at the funeral home, but to say, hey, when your husband passes away and that portion of Social Security is gone, this is a $20,000 check that you can use to replace his income. I think that is a huge part of what people are missing. And I want to throw out kind of two other items on this final expense topic is I don't believe, number one, that we're truly asking for the final expense sale and the needs analysis is being done on this. Because I think the reality as a sales guy, and I can speak to this firsthand because this was me. I sold a lot of insurance policies over my years, probably not as many as some people and hopefully more than others. But guys, so often I was just tickled to death that I made the sale, the MedSup sale. Look, I didn't want to ask any more questions and blow that. But as I've said many times, we see models in business right now. McDonald's is really kind of the one that sticks out the most with their kind of supersize campaign. You know, you go through the line and you order a number 2, and then they say, would you like to supersize that? And you say yes or no. And they say, well, would you like to add an apple pie? I mean, they're upselling you. Never have I gone through the McDonald's line and said, hey, I'd like to get a number 2. And they said, do you want to supersize that? And I said, you know what? Forget the whole deal. I don't want my number 2 since you asked if I want to supersize it. I just very politely say, I say, you know what? I'd like to have the large fry, but just still want the medium drink. That's kind of my MO because I love French fries. It's a whole different topic. But the point is, I bet McDonald's, and I have no idea what the number is, I would bet that it's a lot of money that they generate on an annual basis across every one of their stores by simply asking, would you like to supersize that? And so we as an organization have put together just a simple reminder paper that we put in kits and that we put to our direct sales on their computers that just says, do you want to supersize this? And it's simply a reminder, guys, for our agents to ask the question. The other thing that I think I would throw out that we see a lot is that when you ask somebody about final expense, you're really not giving a presentation. And here's the example that I would give on that. Is we have made a living, and many of you, if not all of you on the phone, have as well, selling Medicare supplement insurance. I came in the business in 2001, selling MedSup policies with Mutual of Omaha. I'm sure it's the same story that many people echo, starting when I did. And what I would do is I would go into a house and I would sit down with the consumer and I would say, hey, I'm here to talk to you about Medicare supplement insurance. And most of the people would say, I already have a supplemental policy. Now, here's the fork in the road that I think we hit with final expense is how many policies would I have on the books right now with MedSup? Or how many would I have written when I was in the field if when their answer is, I already have a MedSup, I said, oh, okay, cool. Well, thanks for letting me come out. I hope you have a great day. I bet I would have sold just a small fraction of what I have on the books. The reason is because MedSups are commodities. Look, you need to find out first and foremost what plan does the consumer have, and then more importantly, what do they pay for it? So when someone says, "Man, I have a MedSup policy," I say, "Well, that's great. If you don't mind, let's take a look at what your MedSup policy is." So they pull it out, and it's a Plan F with Company A, and it's $40 more than what we can offer the plan that we have in that area for. And so then you go through that presentation and you say, hey, look, here's what you got. Here's where there's some savings available to you. And then you move forward with that. And I think what's happening with final expense is the agent makes the sale of the MedSup, or they go in and they say, hey, do you have anything for your final expense set up? You have your funeral taken care of? And the consumer says yes. And the agent feels like that was a swing of the bat, and it's really not. When that answer is it's taken care of, I think, guys, we've got to dig deeper and we've got to say, okay, that's great. It sounds like you've done a really great job. Tell me, when you say taken care of, what you mean. Like, how much is that? What does it cover? Is it a death benefit that's immediate? And really dig in to be helpful for that consumer. I just got a policy, or I'm sorry, a question here. I'm not a great multitasker, so it totally threw me off. But the question of final expense policies available for someone with cancer. The short answer to that is the availability of policies most certainly offers up some guarantee issue plans. I'm not sure specifically what state you're in or what plans you already do have, but we do have policies that are a guarantee issue plan. And so I think the short answer to that question is most likely anything that's out there we can accommodate. So if you just want to give us a call, again, I don't want to throw out any names of products. I've got one in mind right now, but I really don't want it to be a call of what product is best and which one's not. But give us a call after, and we can make sure that we take care of you on that. As you're asking questions with the consumer in the house about the product, I think it's really important, and I've put it up here, to wait and see what people have to say. I think great salespeople are great listeners, and as someone who's talking to a consumer, if you've all heard that saying that if you let someone talk long enough, they'll tell off on themselves. And I think at the end of the day, the products that we're selling are products that the consumer really needs. And if you lay those products out and you just sit back and you listen to what the consumer is telling you, oftentimes maybe what they're saying is not really what they mean. But if you listen close enough, you can get an understanding of what their concerns are, what their worries are. Whether it's a financial issue, which I think most of the time people would say, pretty much everything comes down to finances. But, I challenge people. My style, I guess, is pretty direct. I try to be incredibly polite, courteous, without sugarcoating things. And so oftentimes you'll hear people say, well, I can't afford it right now, call me next year. And guys, the question I ask in a situation like that is, could you have afforded it last year? Could you have afforded it the year before? Because the reality, and my dad taught me this at a young age, it was kind of a simple saying that he said is, he always said, son, it's always going to be something. And it doesn't matter if our car gets paid off next month, we're going to need a new roof. And as soon as the roof is taken care of, the hot water heater breaks. And when the hot water heater breaks, our one of our kids loses their job and we got to pay for their cell phone. I don't think there's ever a time in life that is really a great time, at least for me. I mean, I can't speak for anybody on the phone, but generally speaking, like you're just, a lot of things are thrown your way every day, every week, every month. And we just have to prioritize those things and know that, especially with the senior population, as bad as it sounds, that they're closer to the end than they ever have been. And being able to really provide something for somebody that you're passionate about is, I think, incredibly important. And I'll end on this. It was a conversation that we had with our staff a couple weeks ago. And it was really a conversation that I drove as I tried to talk about the importance of what we do. And it's something for you to think about. Again, I'll kind of tell this story and end with it. Let me state ahead of time, I don't think that someone jumping off a bridge and selling final expense are in any way comparable, okay? But I think it's a great illustration for how much I care about my customer. So in a training with a couple of our managers about 2 weeks ago, one of the things that I kind of brought up was, I absolutely love what I do. And if you talk to me long enough, you hear that there's a passion and an excitement about what I do that hasn't changed in 18 years. I mean, we truly work, as sappy as it may sound, we work in a business that makes a difference. When people buy a med sup from us and they end up with cancer and they call you and they say, hey, I want to go to MD Anderson. Does my policy cover that? And we get to say yes, and they get the best cancer care in the country. And I'm not putting in a plug for MD Anderson. I'm just saying that we are helping people out in a time that is absolutely critical for them. Because think about when your customer uses what you've sold them, it's never, ever a good time. You know, when they cash in that cancer policy, it may be the worst experience of their life. When they're in the hospital getting their bills paid for their triple bypass surgery, it's the worst time of their life. When their wife dies and they're cashing in that final expense policy, it is the worst day of their life. And so I really believe truly that every day we have the opportunity to make a difference in the lives of people, in their kids' lives. And that passion has to come from us. I said earlier, we've got to believe in what we're doing. And so where I'm kind of drawing this comparison, and again, it's not a great comparison in the sense of one is very serious and one is not in the grand scheme of life. But I think it draws a very good picture of the importance, and that is this. We live geographically in a place where there's a lot of lakes. So we have a lot of bridges. And we have this one particular bridge that kind of connects what we call the county when you leave the city limits of Hot Springs. And as I was talking to one of my managers a couple weeks ago, I was talking about this passion of final expense and just why it is that we as agents don't feel like everybody needs to have a policy. And so the question I asked her was, hey, look, if you were driving over the 70 West Bridge and there was somebody that was ready to jump off, it's been a rough day, and what would you do? And she said, I would pull over. And I said, well, what would you say? And she said, well, I would go over and I would talk to this person. And I said, what if the person told you, thanks for talking to me, but I don't want to have any more conversations with you or anyone else? Would you get back in your car and leave? And the manager at my office says, well, no, I wouldn't get back in my car and leave. I would stay and I would continue to talk. And I said, well, how long would you stay for? And she said, well, I would stay until the person changed their mind. And I said, well, what if that were, an hour? What if it were 2 hours? She said, well, it wouldn't matter to me because I know that what I'm telling this person is best for their life. And again, let me be very careful in saying, I'm not trying to draw a comparison in what we do as we're saving lives or talking people off bridges. But my passion for what we do and making this difference in people's lives is one that when someone says, hey, you know what? I'm not interested. I'm not interested in making sure my wife's taken care of when I pass away, because that's what they're saying. They may say, oh, give me a call back in a month, or let's talk about this later. I can't afford it. But at the root of what the issue is, it's like, hey, I'm not going to worry about my wife because I'm gone. So I think going back to kind of the comparison there is, look, I'm not getting back in the car. Now, clearly, I'm not saying you should stay all night and never leave regardless of being kicked out. But I think it's this passion behind what we do is like, look, I get what you're saying, and I understand that you're telling me you can't afford it. And I understand that you're telling me your kids are going to handle this. And I understand all of these things that you're saying. But let me tell you this. Let me tell you that if your kids are like me, I can't support myself and my kids, let alone pay for my parents' funeral. I would tell my parents, don't put me in that position. If anyone on this call has ever had to pay for someone else's funeral, you know that comes at a really tough time for you and your family. These are things that I think we have to get past. Hey, here's the app, and let's make sure it's the right document. I think that, it sounds old-fashioned, and it's always been my thing, is that if we do right by people, like we're in the people business, we're in the business of making people's lives better. And if every life that we touch, we can make better, then we make commissions. I mean, that's just a byproduct of doing an amazing thing. But we have to be out there and really believe as agents that what we're doing is making a difference, and not be ready to fold up our camp and leave as soon as somebody gives us an objection that we know isn't beneficial for them. So I'm over my time by 5 minutes. I've gotten one question that I believe I've answered. I'm available for any additional questions that anybody might want to chime in on, kind of offline, or shoot us an email. I really appreciate everybody's time. I would love to talk more. Again, if you kind of want to set something up one-on-one, and we'll just go from there. So thanks, everybody, for your time. I really appreciate it.